Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. I'm Cora Giroux, host of the Teaching Yoga podcast and founder of the Business 101 Yoga Teacher Training. Okay, so we are doing something different this week, and I'm really excited about it, and that is answering your questions. So last week in my newsletter, I put out a call to any of you. If you had a question that you wanted me to answer for one of these videos, then I would love to hear about it. And so many of you responded. So I'm going to be working through those questions week by week with these videos. But I highly encourage you to submit a question if you have one as well. And I'll make sure there is a link down below so that you can submit your own question. Before we get into that though, I have a little announcement to make. So, in the last couple of weeks, we have received so many emails from you, and thank you very much if you sent us one of these emails, that you are going back and looking for old episodes of the practice to watch and engage with. And the way that this system is currently set up is those episodes expire each week. We didn't know that you were going back and watching them, but you have told us that you were not able to access them, and we want to make those accessible to you. So I was going to wait until November to officially launch my YouTube channel. Maybe you thought that was coming, maybe you figured it out, but just so that I can be of service to you, one of the great things about being a small business is you can be agile and you can pivot. So from this video moving forward, all of these videos will be on YouTube, so that you can go back and reference them if there's something that you're interested in but you didn't get to within the week. So I would be super grateful if you would head over to my YouTube channel. There will be a link below where you can hit subscribe. And that way you'll be able to see those videos on YouTube as well as in your weekly newsletter. And if you're watching this on YouTube, yay, I wasn't planning on this being the first video, but here we are. Okay, so let's get into today's question. Today's question comes from Jax, and Jax is a full-time yoga teacher. Jax asks, how do I deal with procrastination or organizational issues? I have ADHD and I struggle to focus. Sometimes I hyper-focus and I'm on a roll and then I exhaust myself. I'd like to know how to stay motivated, inspired, and on track. Basically, how do I keep myself accountable? So, Jax, thank you so much for submitting your question. I chose your question to answer because I actually get this question a lot. So you are not the only person that has asked me about this. I've got my notes as always, and this is something that I have worked through a lot on my own, something I still struggle with. So I do think I have a lot to offer you in terms of strategies to help yourself stay accountable and get shit done. Okay, so the first thing I would suggest, Jax, for you and for anyone out there listening who has struggled with an issue similar to Jax, is to know your accountability type. Gretchen Rubin has a quiz called the 4 Tendencies Quiz, and I'll make sure that there's a link to that either in the newsletter or below this video. And I would suggest straight away, first thing you do is go take that quiz. Each person is different, right? Just how each person will be a different yoga teacher and each style of yoga is good for one type of person, and not all styles of yoga are good for everyone. The same is true with accountability. So the first thing to do is figure out your accountability type. I'm not going to go through those here because I think Gretchen Rubin does a really great job of helping you understand what your accountability type needs. But I'll add some additional strategies. But first things first, step number 1, go take the 4 Tendencies quiz by Gretchen Rubin. I think you will get a lot out of that. Step number 2, I put out an Instagram carousel post a few weeks ago about the 5 layers of accountability. I will also link to that Instagram post because there's a lot in it. However, I will go over it briefly here before we move on to the next strategies. So essentially, when you're thinking about accountability and how to follow through on your business goals, there are different layers of scaffolding that you can put in place. Down at the bottom end are the lowest layers of scaffolding, and as you move up these 5 layers of accountability, the level of support increases. So the first thing that I would recommend, maybe you've done this already, but if not, it's worth being said, have a hard deadline. So whatever goal or project it is that you're trying to do, set a deadline for yourself and don't waver from that deadline. Work backwards, plan the time you need to in your calendar to make sure you get it done. So the first layer of those 5 layers of accountability is have a hard deadline. The next one is to announce it publicly. So I was planning on announcing this publicly, that I would be starting this YouTube channel in October after Business 101 enrolls, and then I probably will still do that. I'll do a bit of a launch in October for this channel. But announcing it publicly via your social media or via your newsletter can help you keep it accountable, because you know people are depending on you and wanting to know, hey, when's that YouTube channel going to be launched? So having a hard deadline, layer number 1. Layer number 2 is announcing it publicly. Layer number 3 is getting other people involved in your project or whatever it is that you're doing. So if there's something that you need to accomplish, certain accountability types will do really, really well when they have someone to be responsible to. So you could hire a contractor if you're building a website, for example, a graphic designer to help you get certain tasks over the line. And you have to report to that graphic designer and give them what they need in order for them to do their job. So layer number 3, what ways can you get other people involved in your work and in your project? Layer number 4, hire a manager. If you are really struggling with this, I would suggest that you look for a VA with the specific skill set of managing your time and you being accountable to that person. So you could go on a platform like Upwork and look for someone with time management or EA, like executive assistant type skills, and get that person to help you manage your calendar. And then you report to your EA or your VA and allow that to help keep you accountable. So sometimes we need someone nagging us before we can actually get things done. That's one of the biggest things I see in business, is that you don't have a boss, right? Which is amazing, but also it means that there's no one to tell you what to do. So if you look for someone with that specific skill set and you write a really clear job description and you hire yourself a manager. I have done this and it's really effective. The last layer of accountability, I would say, is hire a coach. And the reason why I put that after hire a manager is it may be more expensive to hire a coach than it would be to hire a VA to manage you. So you might actually get more accountability with a VA, but it depends on you. If you respond well to authority, having someone you respect to report to could be another layer of accountability. Okay. So I have that all wrapped up in an Instagram post. I will link to that as well. Step number 1, Gretchen Rubin's 4 Tendencies quiz. Step number 2, look at those 5 layers of accountability. I'm going to look at my notes because I have a lot more for you actually. Okay, the next thing is to never sit down to work and ask yourself, what should I do? You always want to show up for work with a plan. So if you're going to sit down at your computer, you should know what it is specifically that you're doing. You can have this laid out in a number of ways. Let's say it's the first thing in the morning. You could set up a workday startup ritual so that you know you go through these 5 tasks. You check your DMs, you check your email, you look at your calendar, you write a gratitude list. Right? So you could have a set of specific tasks that you do every time you sit down at your computer. If you're looking at this sort of in a more macro or bigger way, you could also have things planned in your calendar with detail. So if you use something like Google Calendar, you can create a task, you can chunk out the time, and then in the description, you can actually list the steps that you need to do to get it done. So you always want to show up with a plan. You never want to arrive just to work and get stuff done. You always want to have a really specific target and goal for that work session so that you know when you can finish, you know when you can end your work session and move on to the next thing. Okay, I've got more. Keep your phone in the other room. This is something that I used to do, and I'm actually bringing it back into my work life because with all the craziness that's going on in the world, I have become severely addicted to my phone again. And it's something that I have noticed was really hampering my productivity. So I have moved my phone out of the room where I work. It's actually in my gym, which is not close to where I work at all. So I would have to like open multiple doors and, go to a different part of my house to get it. So I would highly suggest, if you have any addictive tendencies with your phone, keep it in the other room. You could also look at technology like Newsfeed Eradicator. It's an app that I have installed on my computer that actually doesn't let me see the newsfeed on Facebook. So if I want to check Facebook to be in my membership group, I can just check that group and get in and get out and not get sucked into the newsfeed. So if there are particular sites that you feel you are wasting your time on and not actually being productive, then I would suggest looking for tools that can actually block your ability to do that. I have an addictive personality. I know that I need to not rely on my willpower, but actually put supports in place so that I make the right choices that I know that I want to make. I take all the support I can get. So some of you will be like, why don't you just not check it? Well, that doesn't work for me. If it works for you, amazing. But Jax, you might be struggling with this, so I thought I would share. Oh, yes. Last tip is to set specific time frames for shallow work. There's a book by Cal Newport called Deep Work, where it identifies that there are two different ways that the brain works. One is with shallow work and one is with deep work. Deep work is probably the stuff that you might actually enjoy, stuff where you're creative and you're building something, and maybe you're writing or filming. This is deep work, filming a video, something like that. Whereas shallow work is the stuff that I actually really hate and struggle with, which is like checking email, checking DMs, commenting on Instagram, all that little piecemeal type work. But that type of work can really suck you in, right? And I could answer emails all day long if I wanted to. Have set schedules for that. So only answer or do shallow work between like 9 and 9:30 or whenever it is that you can actually allocate to those types of tasks so that you're not constantly interrupted by those shallow work tasks when you are trying to do deep work. There's another book called Free to Focus by Michael Hyatt, which I also highly recommend. I'll put all those links below. Okay, so I think that's it in terms of my tips. I have lots more, but this video is already getting super long, so I just want to make sure that I don't bore you to death. I'll run through my steps again. So step number 1, take the quiz by Gretchen Rubin called The 4 Tendencies. Step number 2, check out my post on Instagram called The 5 Layers of Accountability. Step number 3, always make sure that you know what you're going to do when you sit down at your computer. Do not show up wondering, what am I going to do today? I'm going to look at my notes. Step number 4, keep your phone in the other room. Step number 5, if there is any particular app that sucks you in, there will probably be an app to stop you from doing that. The one I use for Facebook is called Newsfeed Eradicator. I think it also works for Twitter. And the last one is have dedicated time for your shallow work where all you're doing are those short attention span tasks like checking email or responding to DMs so that you can have your deep work done in a different portion of your day. Don't let the shallow work encroach on your deep work. Okay, so I think that is it for this video. Since it will be on YouTube, please feel free to comment, subscribe to the channel if you found this helpful. I give business, marketing, mindset, and something else advice, marketing, mindset, and something else that I'm forgetting. Oh, business strategy. Here we go. If you're still with me, business strategy, marketing, and mindset advice for yoga teachers. If you enjoyed this video, like or comment, and I will see you in the next edition of The Practice.